Let's imagine that you were called upon to provide a list that would describe you, that is to say, your profile. In writing your identity, what would be on that list? Well, we might start with physical characteristics, like, well, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? What is your birth date? We could also include things like the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, maybe, I don't know, your body build. So you have all those things on the list. As you're creating this profile, you might want to include your religious beliefs. Or if you have no religion, you may want to include your political ideology, that you may be a Republican, a Democrat, neither, or, an independent, or maybe if you're not into politics, you just put, yeah, I'm really not into politics. What about your worldview? Do you tend to be conservative, liberal? Where are you on the spectrum? And so you're making this list. And by the way, I encourage you to actually consider doing this. Make a list, put it on paper. Your identity, your profile, who you are. Now, why would we do such a thing? Well, because we understand that when people have a strong sense of identity, they know not only who they are, what they believe. Are you a male or female? Are you a XY or an XX? Once we understand who we are and we don't allow anyone to confuse us, we are very resistant to thought reform. Some people call it brainwashing, but thought reform is, in essence, expressed sometimes as gaslighting, because that's what gaslighting is. It's a form of thought reform, getting us to change our perception about ourselves, typically making us think negatively about ourselves. Well, why would somebody want to do that? Well, if you saw the movie Gaslighting, you'd understand that, and I think many of you probably did. And I'm guessing nearly everybody already basically understands what gaslighting is. Gaslighting in the movie, well, the plot was there was this bad guy and he married a woman for her money, but it was her money, not his money. How could he get access to it? Well, he had to convince the woman that she was insane so he could have her committed so he could have access to her wealth. And while he was doing it, he needed to convince others so he could justify his actions. So how did he do that? Well, by convincing her that when the gas lights dimmed, this is in a day and age before people had electricity, they used gas lights to light their homes on the inside. And so when the interior gas lights would dim and then they'd go back up to the normal light, that was kind of obvious, right? But the bad guy convinced his wife that, no, the gas lights didn't dim. You must be going crazy. And for a while, it worked. And he managed to not only convince her that she was nuts, but other people as well. That's the whole principle of gaslighting. So when somebody is gaslighting you, what they are doing is they are convincing you, in a sense, that your rational self is not there, that you are something other, something far more negative, that you have a serious problem. They do this so they can interject themselves into your life, take control. That's what narcissists do. They use gaslighting to control you. Probably one of the most hideous parts about gaslighting is they not only convince you, but they convince other people. So you're stranded, you're stuck, you're isolated, you're all by yourself. You're all alone. But if you have a strong sense of identity, we know that it's very difficult to gaslight somebody. How do we know that? Well, Robert J. Lifton, we talked about him before in the past, did a study of people who had been brainwashed in China, and I think he also did some studies in North Korea, or people that came from North Korea. And he would interview these people. He went to the Middle East, or the Far East rather, and he would actually interview these people. And he watched and he noticed the techniques that the communists used to brainwash people to convince them, and he discovered that basically they were using the same techniques as were used by what we would call dangerous religious or political cults. But he also noticed the people who had a strong sense of self-identity, who knew what they believed, were very resistant to brainwashing. Those, for example, were Catholic missionaries, the priests who were working in China. They were virtually impossible to brainwash because they were centered. They had a strong sense of identity. So to resist gaslighting, you need to know who you are. Are you a male or female? Are you tall or short? Are you medium? Are you an athlete? Are you not athletic? I mean, that's part of who you are, part of your identity. Just being honest. I mean, this is between you and you, no one else, you know? So just be honest with yourself. What is your religious belief? Do you have a strong religious belief like those Catholic priests did, those missionaries? Or do you have no belief at all? You're absolutely positively convinced there's nothing out there. So when the religious cult comes calling, you're impossible to, not impossible, but near impossible to convert because you have that strong sense of who you are. So number one is this. Once love bombing begins, and then the narcissist moves you into the gaslighting phase, what happens is if you are not prepared, they want to put you in a position where you can't trust your obvious perceptions. Well, in the movie Gaslighting, it was the perception of the gaslights dimming. In your case, the narcissist may want to convince you that you're not very bright, that you're not very intelligent, you know, kind of like the gaslights being dimmed. They want you to think that, well, you actually are dim. Have you ever been in a position where somebody just called you dumb? You know, maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a parent, maybe it was one of your peers, you know, a playmate, whatever. They just constantly tried to convince you that you're really, really stupid. Probably you've had that experience, but you may have also had an experience where somebody tried to convince you that you're extremely intelligent. Probably not, but that does happen sometimes. Sometimes parents will do that. It's not a good idea. But, you know, what is your IQ? You know, there's some people out there who say, well, let's don't worry about that. Yeah, you should be concerned about your identity because the narcissist wants to put you in a position where you just can't trust what is very obvious. And if they continue to do this, what happens is you begin to believe the lie. You begin to believe the myth. You begin to believe that you really are dumb. Second thing is narcissists then will exploit your insecurities. So they create in your mind insecurities that weren't there before. Or maybe, you know, confusion. What would we call this? Identity confusion. So if you know what your identity is, they can't confuse your identity because, you know, it's solid rock. Well, what if it's not solid rock? What if it's like that lump of clay that we were given in art class when I was in first grade? So there I was, first grade. They gave us this little lump of clay. Actually, it wasn't a lump. It was a rectangle. A little, what would you call it? Like a little loaf of modeling clay. And you take it in your hands, this nice, perfectly shaped loaf of clay. I'm going to call it a loaf instead of a clump because what we did in first grade art class is we would take that loaf of clay and would mash it up and we would convert it into a lump. That's what narcissists do with your brain when they're gaslighting you. They're taking your perfectly shaped, sane self and they're scrambling, confusing your brain. Identity confusion. And then, after it is turned into a lump, then you make something different, a different shape out of it. So the teacher of first grade would say, what do you want to make? You want to make an animal? Go ahead and make an animal. Whatever you want. You want to make an ashtray for your parents? Make an ashtray. And so there we were, 31 little kids. And we were taking our perfectly shaped lump of clay, and we were kind of gaslighting. We didn't know it, but we were turning it into mush, and then we were going to turn it into some beautiful work of art. I decided I was going to make an elephant out of my lump of clay. Well, it turns out that I think when we were done, we had 31 paperweights. You know, paperweight is something you put on paper and weigh it down, and then we took it home to our parents, and here, I made this in school for you. It's a paperweight. So if you have any paper that needs to be weighted down, just put this on top of the paper, and the paper won't blow away, which is probably a good thing, because back in 1950, whatever it was, 1958, nobody had air conditioning. We opened the windows, and papers would blow all over the place. So, okay, so it was a little bit useful, right? I don't know what happened to my elephant turned paperweight, but it's got to be out there somewhere, 65 years later. This is a thought reform technique, and it involves 3 parts. It's real simple. Number 1 is you melt the ice, turn it into water, and then you take the water and you put it into a form so you can reshape it. And step number 3 is you refreeze the ice. So it is unfreeze, reform, and refreeze. Unfreeze, reform, unfreeze. That effectively is what we were doing with a lump of clay. That is effectively what the narcissist wants to do with your brain. That is what a dangerous cult wants to do with your mind. The very first principle, I'm repeating myself, but this is important. The very first principle is to get you to question your identity. That's why we make that list. That's why we define who we are down to the smallest detail. Number 3 is this. What the narcissist wants you to do in this process is he or she wants you to come between you and yourself. That may not make sense at first, but stop and consider this. The victim in the movie Gaslight, who was eventually rescued by somebody who was observing what was going on and put a stop to it, but the victim in the Gaslight was separated. Identity confusion between what she knew was true and what she was being told was true. So what she knew was true was the gaslights were dimming. But then she was given a different story, and the story was, no, you're going crazy. And so now there was this division. She came between herself and a new thinking process. The old thinking process was the gaslights are dimming. The new thinking process was, you have a mental problem. You're not saying things correctly. And the gaslighter, the narcissist, was able to convince this woman that, yeah, she was going crazy. And other people were convinced as well. Until she finally figured out, with the help of another, what was going on. So let me be the other. But I'm helping you figure out what's going on. There is somebody, a gaslighter, a narcissist, who is trying to give you the wrong perception of who you are. They're saying you're dumb, you're lazy, you're inconsiderate. They're saying all these things about you. What they're saying is your self-perception is askew. You're somebody else. Eventually, you're going to start listening to that other person, that bad guy, that narcissist, because, well, he's convincing others as well, and now they're putting pressure on you, subtle as it may be, that, well, you've come between you and yourself, and that takes us to number 4, which we already alluded to, and that is that the narcissist is coming between you and others. As many people as he or she can possibly convince that, we're saying, well, that you're not too bright, or that you're not who you think you are. Maybe you do have some talent, and the narcissist is saying, no, you're a no talent. Why would they do that? Why would a narcissist want to come between you and yourself and you and others? And the answer, it's obvious, is they want to manipulate you. They want to control you so they can have supply. That's what narcissists are all about. They exist primarily to control other people so they can boost their ego. And there they are. And we wonder sometimes, well, why do these people even exist? I mean, why would anybody want to do that? I can understand having a little bit of self-esteem, and we should. And yeah, we like to be in control of our lives, and sometimes that means that other people can't have their ways all the time. But a narcissist takes it to the extreme, where nobody can have their way anytime, and if they do, the narcissist doesn't like it, and if they can control it, they will control it. And if you are the person, you are the individual, they will control. What I want to challenge you to do is to make that list your identity, who you are, so that you make yourself resistant to gaslighting. I also want you to take a look at the 2 rectangles on the screen. If you like what you hear, let's keep talking if you'd like. We'll keep hanging out if you just click on one of those two rectangles. If not, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all next time.